If I'm having trouble making a decision, can an AI life coach chatbot programmed by me, a professional life coach, help me solve it? I'm putting AI to the test to see if it can coach me in a real life coaching request. I'm going to share the conversation with you so that you can benefit from the insights I personally gain. And also, I want to reflect the feedback that I have about the quality of coaching that this bot is capable of. If you'd like to try it for yourself, I'll include the link to download it for free in the description. But first, if you're new here, welcome. I'm Ellen, a certified life coach, a singer, a mother, and a lover of alliteration, dogs, and deep conversation. And this is the Contentment Creator channel, the show designed especially for creative entrepreneurs to dig deep, to clarify your life vision, catalyze your creative flow, and fuel your entrepreneurial fire. If you're interested in topics about personal development and healing, entrepreneurship and empowerment, and creativity and authenticity, I encourage you to subscribe. It's free to you, important to me as a creator, and most importantly, it connects us. If you're watching on YouTube, you're going to see the transcript next to me here on the screen. But if you're just listening, then I'm going to be reading back the conversation to you instead of reading it in real time as I go through the coaching request. I got some feedback that the audio was a little bit weird last time, so this gives us a little better chance of you hearing everything and for us to get really into the nuances of this conversation. Okay, let's dive in. So I said, I'm struggling with the process of hiring a nanny for our family. For context about our family, Matt and I work from home, and I'm a very present mother to my two children. I breastfeed and often put my infant down to naps throughout the day, and I often see my toddler at lunchtime, kiss her and hug her before nap time, and see her at various points during the day. This means that I'm very involved with our nanny. I'm seeking someone I get along well with, and most importantly, communicate well with. We work together as a team around the kids, so my highest priority is compatibility with the nanny's personality. However, it also means a lot to me that this person is qualified as both a caregiver and household helper, meaning experience with Montessori, our educational approach, developmental growth, managing the needs of two young children simultaneously, and having the bandwidth and organizational skills to help with household tasks while the children nap or play independently. I'm truly looking for a unicorn of a human, and every time I go through this process, it's highly activating to my nervous system because the right fit is so important to me. I truly want someone who will weave into the fabric of our family for years, which increases the pressure to find the perfect person. But what I'm finding is that humans are humans. No one is perfect, and every time someone gives me the impression they are perfect, we've gotten burned during the hiring process. It's more likely that the, quote, perfect candidate is actually someone who has some things that aren't ideal about them up front. But those, quote, imperfections are things that I can accept or work around. Right now, I have 5 candidates I'm moving from phone interviews to in-person interviews, and I need help figuring out what I need to prioritize or pay most attention to, what questions I should be asking, and how will I know who's right for us. The elements that matter most to me are my relationship with them. Is there ease? Do we communicate well? How they relate to my kids? How do they play? How do they address big feelings? How do they manage two at the same time? How reliable they are? Will they miss work frequently? Will they stay long term for 3 to 5 years? And how proactive are they around household duties? Please prompt me with no more than 5 to 7 concise reflections and questions to my desired outcome. The bot says, what I'm hearing is you're not just hiring childcare, you're choosing who gets emotional access to the inner ecosystem of your home. No wonder your nervous system is acting like this is airport security for your children's souls. Here are 7 concise reflections and questions to guide your interviews. Okay, so right off the bat, it did not understand the prompting because this is intended to be a coaching conversation where we have a back and forth. It asks me a question, I give my answers, and it's a real-time exchange. This gave me 7 bullet points, basically, like a bunch of tips, basically, which is not what I'm looking for. So I reprompted it saying, no, please go one coaching question / reflection at a time as a coaching conversation with me. So sometimes, despite the training that I have given this bot to conduct a coaching conversation and ask one question at a time, it's AI, so it's going to make mistakes. So it says, yes, thank you for redirecting me. Let's slow it down and make this a real coaching conversation. Thanks. What I'm noticing first is that this isn't simply I need to choose the best nanny. It feels more like I need to choose someone I can trust inside the living, breathing rhythm of my motherhood. Accurate. That is much more intimate than a hire. So let's begin here. What would you most like to walk away with from this conversation? Clarity on your priorities, calm in your body, confidence in your decision-making process, or something else? Okay, so pros and cons. The right off the bat, I am very glad that it is asking me what I want out of this conversation. If you walk into a coaching conversation with somebody, what is most, let's say, high level is for them to establish clear boundaries of the conversation. A lot of people come into a coaching conversation with really big life topics. It could be about their marriage or their spirituality or their health and well being or their business. And a lot of times it's a really big conversation that won't be solved in 1 hour of talking. So, a sign of quality coaching is that they establish a coaching request at the top of the call where we set a clear goal, a clear aim for where we want to end up by the end of it, because coaching can be a really meandering process. Like it gets deep quickly if it's done well. And we want to make sure that we come back to exactly where you want to be or get what you want when you walk away from that conversation. So the pro of this is it's doing that, which is great. The con is that instead of it just stopping with what would you most like to walk away from this conversation, it gave me a multiple choice, which what I've from having done this video or this series a few times now, I've noticed that it really likes giving multiple choice. And sometimes it really works, and sometimes it's just completely unnecessary. I feel like this one was a little bit unnecessary, in my opinion. It could have asked, what do you want to walk away from this conversation with? And I could have said, my answer. I didn't need for it to give me options because then it tends to lead you. One of the qualities of a high level master coach is that there's very little leading going on. It's very open ended questions, and it wants the client to really fill in the information from themselves. So if you're giving multiple choice, that kind of takes away that opportunity and puts in answers for you. So, pro and con. I said to their question that I would say clarity and confidence in my decision-making process and knowing what matters most to me, aka my priorities, is what I want out of the conversation. It said, beautiful. So the outcome is clarity and confidence, not finding certainty exactly. More like building an inner compass that you trust even while the decision is imperfect. Here's the question. When you imagine choosing wrong, quote unquote, what are you most afraid would happen? Practically, emotionally, and relationally? I really like this question. It didn't need to say practically, emotionally, or relationally. Again, it's giving like that multiple choice thing, but it asked a decent question of like, what am I afraid of? A little bit of feedback here, because this is not a bad question, and I think it is a valuable question, but I think it came a little bit too soon. And by that, I mean, another sign of really quality coaching is that not only do you establish what the end goal of conversation is, but you really establish where you are, where you want to be, and then what that bridge looks like together with the client. It's a really valuable part of establishing a partnership with somebody where you both kind of know what path you're on together. And this one dives straight into what am I afraid of happening rather than saying, okay, so what you want out of this conversation is X. What's in the way of that? Or what's missing for you right now? Or what would it look like for you to have that? What does that mean to you to have confidence in a decision-making process? Those are all more valuable questions to keep up front in a coaching conversation because it really establishes what the client needs out of the conversation. A lot of times a client will come in not really knowing what they need or want out of the conversation. I know, having had this conversation as the client and now thinking back as the coach, I know I wasn't really certain what I was looking for out of the conversation. I knew that I wanted to understand what was important to me going into this hiring process, but I didn't really know what that looked like. And you'll see what happens when you don't establish those kinds of parameters from the beginning. It can get a little rambly. Okay, so we'll go with what am I afraid of? I said that I'll have to start all the way over from scratch with this search process, which is incredibly time consuming, draining, and activating for me. Of course, it said. That makes so much sense. It sounds like the fear is less, what if this person isn't perfect? And more, what if I have to re enter the maze? The exhaustion is not theoretical. Your body remembers the cost. If you trusted that you would not have to start from scratch, that you had a reusable process, backup plan, and clearer filters, how might that change what you'd be looking for in these candidates? Okay, so uh, it's an okay question. I think it's helping if you're first of all, it's encouraging the context of trust yourself. Like, right? Like a lot of the hiring process in any or decision making process in general is developing a good connection to my own intuition, to my self trust. So it's planting that seed for me. I think the thing that for me is not clicking with this question is the latter half of it, where it's like, okay, if you trusted that you wouldn't have to start completely from scratch and that this fear is not insurmountable, it said, how might that change what you'd be looking for in these candidates? And I think the better question would have been, how might that change your experience of this process? Right? Like keeping it zoomed out, keeping it thinking about this as a whole rather than what I'm looking for in the clients. I think I was pretty clear about what I'm looking for in the clients in my like entry post in my prompt to the AI. So it just missed the mark a little bit on the direction of this question for me. But here we go. I said I wouldn't feel pigeonholed into choosing one candidate that isn't an ideal fit from this current batch of people. It said, yes, that's a really important opening. Right now, the batch of candidates may be carrying too much emotional weight because it feels like choose from these five or suffer. That turns discernment into pressure, and pressure tends to make every yellow flag feel either catastrophic or something you must rationalize away. What would need to be true, practically or emotionally, for you to feel like you are choosing freely rather than choosing from scarcity? Love that question. I said, this person would need to bring calm to my nervous system, be a competent and confident caregiver to my kids in a noticeable way, and be open and capable to any household tasks we may ask of them. If they are not all three, then I will know that we must keep looking. It said, that's crisp. I hear three non negotiable signals: calm in your body, competence with your children, willingness around the home. And there's something quietly powerful in what you just said. You're not looking for a flawless person anymore. You're looking for a person who creates felt safety, observable capability, and workable partnership. That's accurate. It says, here's the next question. Of those three, calming presence, caregiver competence, and household proactivity, which one is the quote keystone, meaning if it's missing, the other two cannot make up for it? Solid question. I said competence with my children, but I would say that without all three, they would be unhireable to me. It said, yes, good. That gives your process a spine. And I noticed the language unhireable has a clean strength to it. Not harsh, just clarifying, like a gate with three locks. The first lock is competence with your children, but the door only opens if all three turn. I like that it's using metaphors here. That's a really, really valuable part of a coaching process is if we get too granular and logical and trapped in the reality of the situation, sometimes it can create walls within the conversation. What can be really helpful to open things up and to consider it from a different perspective is relating it to a metaphor. So the fact that it connected my hiring process and these three non-negotiables to almost like a door with three locks. It's like, okay, you can unlock one, but you still have to unlock the other three to get the door open. So it clarifies what the client is saying in a new way. So the bot asks, how will you know in an in-person interview or trial that someone is truly competent with your children? What would you need to see them do, not just say? Great question. Again, this is what I was saying needed to be established at the top, but more broadly about the conversation of like, how do you know you've found the right person or something? And it's now applying that question to a little bit more of a specific part of the conversation, which isn't bad. It's just it's a missed opportunity. So I said, I plan to interview them in person alone first to assess the calming presence and the household proactivity. And then if they pass those two, we will set up a trial day for me to see how they handle two children simultaneously and how they relate to my kids. it says, that sounds wise. You're building a two-gate process instead of trying to answer every question in one meeting. First, can this person be in my space? Then, can this person actually hold my children's world? What I'm also hearing is that you already have a decision architecture emerging, which is different from vibes and panic in a trench coat. For the in person interview, what would calming presence look like and feel like in your body? And what would be an early sign that your nervous system is overriding your discernment? Okay, so I like the direction we're going, but I want to point out that I just contradicted myself in the conversation, and the chat coach missed the opportunity to reflect that because I said in answer to its question, which of these three things is basically the most important? What's the keystone that if this is missing, you can't move forward? And I said competence with my children. But then I said that my process that I'm establishing is actually the reverse, where I'm seeing how I relate to them. Like, are they a presence that I can feel good about in my home? And are they someone that I can partner with around just like being a teammate? And then seeing them interact with my children is the third step. So while I'm saying that the keystone thing that I can't move forward with is how do they relate to my children, my process is actually walking them through the other two first, which, to be honest, is how I want it to be. I would rather know that I can really click with them and mesh with them before I introduce them to my kids, because I don't really want to expose them to people that are not going to be around long. But it just missed an opportunity to reflect something back to me about that truth, about the fact that I said the most important thing is competence with my children, but my process is actually prioritizing the other two first. That doesn't have to mean anything, but it would be a good awareness for it to have pointed out to me or reflected to me. So in answer to its question, what would calming presence look and feel like in my body? And what would be an early sign that my nervous system is overriding discernment? I said, if I don't feel at ease in their presence and like we both understand each other easily, then I will feel it in my gut. Can you help me refine my decision-making process more intentionally in this conversation? Or how to feel less overwhelmed by the prospect of making the wrong choice? So I, as the client, felt like we weren't really getting to the heart of what I wanted to talk about. And so I directed it with more questions of like, this is what I want help with. And I did that because it didn't establish more clearly at the beginning that depth of direction together of like, we're here, we want to go there. What is the bridge between? The coach didn't do that with me, so I'm doing it. And that's partly because of my own coach training, and I'm like kind of self-coaching myself here. So that's worth pointing out to you, the listener. If you do end up using this chatbot for yourself, you may have to kind of direct it where you want it to go. Otherwise, it can get a little bit lost in the weeds. The bot said, yes, and I want to reflect something important. Your gut is not the problem here. The overwhelm is coming from asking your gut to carry the whole decision alone. Let's give your intuition a job, but not every job. I like that. For this process, I'd suggest 3 gates. Okay, so it's offering me a tool. Let's look at it. Gate 1, body and ease. Do I feel calm, clear, and mutually understood with this person? Gate 2, observable skill. Can I see them competently engage both children, especially during friction or divided attention? Gate 3, partnership capacity. Are they receptive, reliable, proactive, and able to collaborate without me becoming the household air traffic controller? So rather than asking, is this the perfect person? You're asking, have they passed the next gate? Excuse me. That lowers the pressure because you are not making a 3 to 5 year decision in one moment. You're making the next wise decision with the information available. Okay, so pausing here, interesting order that they put this in, because it seems like they put the calming presence, the body and ease factor first, and then they put competence with children, and then they put partnership around the household. When I said earlier, my like linchpin keystone factor was the competence with children, but then I clarified that my process actually checks for the other two first. It's the calming presence and the partnership with me. So it's interesting the order that it chose these gates. I'm going to use this tool. I think it's very wise and helpful, but I probably would rearrange the tool to match my process, being like, how does my body feel around this person? Do I feel at ease? Do I feel safe? And then does this person feel like a partner to me? Like, are they proactive? Are they, do they seem reliable? Are they receptive to any feedback or conversations? Or even for me, are they able to express themselves clearly and directly? Is an important skill I value. And then, are they competent with my children would be this third gate in this process that I'm doing. So I would just rearrange the tool, but I still find value in, again, the metaphor helps me think we need to pass through one gate at a time in this process and not try to get ahead to the final decision before we've even walked through these gates. So it says, here's the coaching question. What would help you trust yourself to stop at a no sooner without needing to gather more evidence, justify it, or feel guilty? This is a bomb diggity question, and you'll see why in just a second. I said, I like this gate approach and talking it through with my husband. The question is, am I going to be able to answer in a black and white yes or no to each of these three questions? I tend to pay attention to the gray in life and the possibility that everything's changeable and everyone's trainable. But in reality, I don't want to train required skills or work extra hard to make them work for us. So I need some support in making the no clean and simple for myself. So this is me acknowledging that one of my gaps, like one of the parts of this bridge that I need to build for myself in the conversation, is actually my relationship to the word no. How do I know when someone's a no? And am I willing to just trust that when I reach a no, it is a no and let that person go without thinking, well, this is a good quality and this is a good thing about them and I liked this about them, but this thing was missing. I need to decide what things can be missing and what can't. And that is the clarity that I, as the client, reached through this question. It was just a little late in the game for the conversation. Okay, so it said, yes, this is the exact place to refine. What I'm hearing is your compassion and intelligence can sometimes become a loophole. You can see the potential in people so clearly that it blurs the difference between trainable preferences and required capacity. So maybe the cleaner question is not, could this person improve? It's, would I feel peaceful hiring this person exactly as they are today without needing them to become meaningfully different? Now, because it didn't really ask me a question, it said, you should ask this question instead of this question. I just said, yes, because it didn't ask me a question. And so then it said, yes, that yes feels like the hinge. That's such a strange reflection. So here's the cleaner rule. You're not hiring for potential, you're hiring for current fit. Potential can be a bonus. Warmth can be a bonus. Trainability can be a bonus. But the three gates are not growth areas. They are the price of admission. My next question is, what are the specific things you are willing to train? And what are the things you are no longer willing to train? I feel like this conversation, side note, is very valuable for me as a business owner and for any other business owners out there watching in a hiring process. Like, understanding this tool and the gates that you walk through and what's a non-negotiable skill versus a trainable skill is such a very valuable conversation. So I hope you business owners out there watching are gaining something for yourself. I said, I'm willing to train on our processes around the house. I'm not willing to train on clear communication for the most part, like little feedback here and there is fine about what works best for me. And on being able to handle big emotions or resistance from my toddler or handling naps and feedings for my baby. Beautiful. That's a very clean distinction. You're willing to teach preferences and systems. You're not willing to teach core capacity. That means your no can become much simpler. If the gap is about how your family does things, it may be trainable. If the gap is who they are under pressure with children or communication, it's not yours to train. Here's the next question. Actually, I want to pause on that. That's a really valuable insight that it gave me that I am taking with me for sure of like, okay, the how is less important than the who, which is a truth that I live inside of at all times. But the fact that it identified it from what I said is a very, very powerful takeaway that how we do things in the family, less important than who they are when they're under pressure or when things are hard. So its question is, for each of these three gates, What would be one clear automatic no signal that means you do not need to keep deliberating? I said, becoming activated around my children, being unable to get my daughters to adhere to their routine. And actually, this is a tricky one for me. I have interviewed one of the 5 people already, and they made me feel very safe and they were very attuned to the needs of the household. They were also very calm and kind to my children. But when I gave her my baby to put down to sleep, when she was all ready to go, she spent over an hour trying to get her to sleep and was unable to. Instead of finding whatever worked, she kept trying the same thing over and over again and then gave up and let her play. I had to intervene and get the baby to sleep myself. I liked this person for the first 2 gates, but I've been questioning if she's viable to consider anymore based on her not being able to get my baby down the first time. It said, that is such a useful real life data point, and I can feel why it's confusing. She passed felt safety and household attunement, which are rare and precious. But the nap moment revealed a possible gap in the keystone gate. Not just couldn't get the baby down, but didn't adapt when the strategy wasn't working. So I'd make the question sharper. Is the concern that she failed at one nap, or that under pressure she showed low flexibility and you had to become the problem solver? That either or that it put in front of me of like, is it this or that? On the one hand, in a coaching conversation, if I'm like assessing someone's coaching, that is a closed question. It's not an open-ended question for the client be able to generate their own answer. It's a, is it this or that? Which gets marked down. But as the client in this situation, it did reveal to me what I was doing and what I'm actually afraid of happening, which is that I am the one that has to problem solve core needs of mine. Like being able to put a baby down for a nap is not something I'm willing to problem solve or get involved in when that is one of the most important qualities of a nanny is to be able to maintain a routine with the kids. And that includes helping them go to sleep for a nap. So I said, yes, I had to become the problem solver for her. So I appreciate that it was taking it out of like, is it really about the fact that she failed at this task, or is it really about the fact that you had to problem solve for her? So again, there's a flaw to the question, but it was revealing for me as the client. There it is. The issue is not the nap. The issue is that you had to leave your role as mother/employer and become her operating system, meaning the nanny's operating system. That is exactly the dynamic you do not want to hire. And yet, because she passed 2 important gates, this may not need to be an immediate no. It may be a targeted retest, but only if you feel genuinely willing. Would you feel peaceful giving her one more clearly designed trial moment? Here is the nap routine. If it's not working after 15 to 20 minutes, I want to see how you adapt and communicate. Or does even that feel like you're already training a core capacity? I said, I'm not sure. That's where I'm getting stuck. It said, of course you're stuck. This is the gray zone candidate. High emotional fit, questionable core execution. Those are the hardest because your heart says rare and your nervous system says danger, future labor. Here's the cleanest coaching question I can offer. If this exact nap scenario happened twice a week for the next month, would you feel compassionately patient or quietly resentful and on alert? Again, it's doing the either or, the multiple choice options for me. And I'm not saying that this isn't valuable, but I just really wish it would keep it open. If it said, if this exact nap scenario happened twice a week for the next month, how would you feel? Like, just let it be my answer rather than would it feel this way or that way? And maybe it's because it's AI and it's looking for an algorithm, like it's almost like a what's that called? A choose your own adventure sort of thing where it's like, do you take A or B? And then once you take B, do you take A, B, or C from there? Or do you take, like it's like you're following a map in the AI's intelligence. Maybe that's why it continues to do these multiple choice options despite the training that I've put in it to keep open-ended questions without the multiple choice. So maybe that's why it's doing it. And I would say it definitely limits the possibilities for my answers when it puts me in a pigeonhole like that. But, it's not the end of the world, I would say. So I said, I would feel quietly resentful and like I'd made the wrong choice, which is true. It said, that feels like your answer speaking before your mind can litigate it. Not necessarily she's a bad candidate, more like this specific gap would put me back into the role I'm hiring someone to help relieve. True. So the clean no may be I can appreciate her warmth and household attunement and still not move forward because the keystone skill did not feel solid enough. Here's the next question. What would change in your body if you let this be a compassionate no rather than a case that you have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt? Which is another really great takeaway I got from this conversation is that I do kind of feel like I need to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that someone is right or wrong for the position. And that's just not how it works. Sometimes it is extremely clear and sometimes it's just not. And you just have to choose. And so, me knowing that I'm trying to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that someone is right or wrong may not be an effective strategy in this process, which is a great takeaway for me. I said to his question, what would change in my body is I think I can hold a probably not in my nervous system right now and move forward with the other 4 interviews using these gate frameworks. If I see that someone passes all 3 gates, then the bigger question will be if this person is reliable to stay with us long term and willing to commit in contract. It says that feels very grounded. Probably not is a beautiful nervous system safe category. It keeps you from forcing a final verdict before you need one, while also protecting you from letting hope quietly sneak her way back into the front of the line wearing a mustache. Yeah, I mean, in any hiring process, it's good to stay positive, but sometimes I know for me, I can get very hopeful about potential. And so I like that I mean, AI, especially ChatGPT, is going to be extremely affirming and kind of a yes man to anything you say. That's one of my biggest gripes with AI coaching is it doesn't push back. It doesn't reflect inconsistencies or contradictions in what I say. And it really just doesn't push back. So it's reaffirming that probably not is a good category for me to put somebody in without making them a hard no. But again, like I like that it's affirming like that I might be using hope rather than data to make this decision. And then going back to what it said, and yes, I hear the next layer. Once someone passes these 3 fit gates, you then need a stability gate. So maybe your process becomes gate 1, do I feel calm and mutually understood? Gate 2, are they competent with both children under real conditions? Gate 3, are they willing and proactive around household partnership? Gate 4, do their life circumstances, references, and contract willingness suggest real long-term reliability? Here's the next coaching question. What would you need to see or hear to believe someone is truly available for a 3 to 5 year commitment, not just saying the right thing because they want the job? I said, exactly, I'm not sure. I feel most people are simply saying yes, long term is what I'm looking for, but some are coming out of many short term positions or big life changes that show me they may be in a transition in their life, and this may be a stopgap for them for now. It said, yes, that's your discernment sharpening. Someone saying, I want long term is self report. It's useful, but not enough. What you're looking for is life evidence, their recent patterns, their current season, their reasons for leaving roles, and whether this job fits the direction their life is already moving. A clean way to think about gate 4 is don't ask, do they promise long term? Ask, does their life make long term likely? My question, when you look at a candidate's recent history, what would make you feel this person's life is organized around staying versus this person is currently between chapters? Again, it's doing that thing again, the either or, giving me options. We've talked about that to death, but I really appreciated this reflection as a person hiring anyone that we need to pay more attention to the context of their life than what they say. And I think as a coach, one of the skills I've developed is paying attention to people's language and how it's consistent or inconsistent with their actions and coaching around that. But when I'm not in coaching mode and I'm just a person hiring a nanny to help me take care of my kids, sometimes I'm not always paying attention to those things. So this kind of clicked something into place for me in awareness of like, okay, trust is a thing, right? Like I need to trust this person and that what they say is what they mean. but also how do the words relate to the evidence or the bigger picture of what their life looks like? And knowing the candidates that I currently have on the table, I can see that some of the intuitive resistance I'm feeling towards a couple of people is because they've moved around a lot. They've changed a lot of families in the recent years. And to me, that's giving the like, is the context of their life really speaking to, I can trust that they're going to be here a long time. So that gave me a really helpful reframe. Okay, so my answer was some people have recent history that might suggest they're between chapters, but they truly might be settling down now. And others might appear settled, but could start having children of their own or life changes in the next couple of years, which would change everything. And it said, yes, that's the humbling truth here. You cannot fully forecast someone's future. Damn it. You can only assess whether their present reality aligns with the role. So, gate 4 is not, can they guarantee 3 to 5 years? It's, are they choosing this role from grounded desire and not convenience or uncertainty? And perhaps reliability becomes less about prediction and more about integrity under change. If life shifts, will they communicate early, honestly, and responsibly? What would make you trust not that they'll never change, but that they would handle change in a way that protects your family rather than blindsides it? I really loved this question on both a client level and a coach level because it's important for me to grasp that, like, the last gate in this example of like, how can I trust that they're going to be here for a long time so I don't have to go through this process all over again in a few months or a year, is that I can't know. It's not a guarantee. I can't know what's going to happen in the future for my family or for them. And so I liked that this was like as gentle a pushback as it could give me, where it's like, what if it's not about that they'll never change, but how they handle change is most important. And that I would know that they're going to take care of us and not just blindside us with a really big change. So I answered honestly, I don't know how to assess that in an interview process. It said, that makes sense. You're trying to assess a future behavior that only reveals itself under pressure. So the interview needs to create a small, respectful window into how they've handled change before. Here's one question I'd ask. Tell me about a time you left a family or role earlier than expected. What changed? How did you communicate it? And what did you do to make this transition easier for them? Then listen less for the right answer and more for ownership, timing, empathy, and whether they protected the relationship even when their needs changed. This is so valuable. So if you're listening to this in a hiring process, write that down. I know I did. My coaching question for you, what kind of answer to that question would make your body soften and what kind would make you quietly tighten? I didn't really care about the coaching question that it asked me after it gave me that reflection about what question to ask, what question to ask and what I should be listening for. I like that it's directing me towards listening to my body when they answer, but I kind of felt like there was just too much information and questions, it was too much all at once. So I said, I don't know what kind, but I do believe it will be important for me to tune into my body when I ask that question. It said, yes, and that may be enough for the interview itself. You don't need to know in advance exactly what answer will soften or tighten you. You need to know what you're listening for. Do they communicate like someone who takes responsibility for the impact? Tiny refinement. Before each interview, decide. I'm listening with my body, but I'm not deciding only with my body. Your body gives you a signal, the gates help you interpret it. When your body tightens in an interview, what usually happens next? Do you trust it, explain it away, freeze, overfunction, or gather more evidence? I like this because this cues into gate number 1 a little bit more specifically, where if the first gate that this person has to walk through is that my body feels at peace around them, and I've said that I can explain away things to myself of oh, they have the potential and they're saying all the right things, then it's asking me what are the ways that I might betray my own body's communication? If my body is saying I'm not actually at ease here with this person, how might I justify it or explain it or override it? I think it's a valuable question, but if you remember, the very first prompt I gave was 5 to 7 concise reflections and questions. And folks, we are at, let me count, Let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. We're at 20 questions, guys. This is not listening to the client. So I said I'm ready to wrap up and review the takeaways for me to implement. And then it just reviews everything that we've talked about already, so I'm not going to read it all back to you. But let's go into overall impressions of this. So here's the thing. I did gain more clarity and confidence around my decision-making process, which was my goal for the conversation. So ultimately, I would say this conversation was successful. However, if I were assessing this conversation as a mentor coach, which I have done many, many times in the past, I would say that this is the lowest qualified coach credentialing I would give it. So, in the International Coach Federation, which is the global body that assesses life coaching, which, side note, for anybody who's not familiar with the life coaching profession, life coaching has one very big problem, which is that influencers can just call themselves life coaches, and just anybody can print a Vistaprint card and say, "I'm a life coach," and they are. Um, which, as someone who has years of training and certifications and credentialing and, has had many, many levels of assessment of my coaching, it's a little difficult for me to swallow when people call themselves something that they are not. But our profession does not have something like a doctor would have, or an accountant, or a lawyer. You take universal testing, or you have a degree that says, I have earned this title. In my world, the International Coach Federation is kind of the body of assessment that legitimizes a coach. So if you are in search for a coach, if they have credentialing in any way through the ICF, then you're headed in the right direction with that person. Granted, there are 3 levels of credentialing within the ICF. There's master level coach, which is the most elite. I think only 1 to 2% of coaches in the world achieve that. There's professional certification. So there's MCC, PCC, and ACC. PCC is a highly qualified coach, a really, really skilled coach. They just either don't have the hours that are required for master level certification, or their skill set is still in development, but they are still a highly, highly qualified, trustworthy coach with defined skills in coaching. And then the lowest tier of coaching, which is still qualified as a professional level coach, but has skill building that's needed, is ACC. I would give this AI coach ACC credentialing. It's not doing the worst job that's ever existed. It is not, however, a professional level coach or a master level coach. So that's my assessment. All that to be said, I got a lot of value out of this conversation, and I'm very curious to hear if you did too. Whether you're in the market for a nanny and this helped you kind of define your nanny hiring process and bring to light some things to pay attention to, or you're just a business owner and you're in the hiring process for an employee, I felt like this conversation definitely gave me a lot of value. What do you think? I'd love to hear from you in the comments. If I'm looking for advice on hiring in my business, can an AI life coach chatbot programmed by me, a professional life coach, help me solve it? Let's find out. I'm in a stage right now where I'm looking to hire some new support for my business, but the investment of time and energy to hire and find the support would take away time I use to maintain my business commitments. The upfront investment of time and energy to hire someone new is something I've done before, but never with 2 children and the lower energy I have available. The only way I currently see it possible is if I cram work into evenings and weekends and use my daytime work hours to begin that search, which doesn't align with my values. So, what do I do? How do I approach this transition effectively? The bot says, "You're naming a very real tension. The business needs more capacity, but the path to capacity currently appears to require spending the very capacity you don't have. That's not a logistics problem only, that's a values and energy design problem. And I hear a clear line. I'm willing to grow, but not by violating the life I'm trying to build. That matters." In coaching terms, this is exactly the kind of moment where we define the desired outcome, the obstacle, and the measure of success for this conversation, not the whole hiring process. The ICF describes coaching as partnering with the client to clarify goals, what needs to be addressed, and what success would look like in this session. So let's start at the root. By the end of this conversation, what would feel most useful to have? A clear decision, a gentler hiring strategy, permission to slow down, or a new way of seeing the whole transition? All right, so it's quoting the ICF core competencies at me, which is a little bit off putting as a client, but as a coach, I appreciate what it's trying to do. However, it did the same thing that it did in the previous segment that we did on hiring a nanny, which is it asked me what I want out of this conversation. It gave me a multiple choice, which is not ideal. Ideally, we want to leave it in the client's hands to say what they want out of it rather than take words out of the bot's mouth. And, it says in the intro that in order to set this conversation up, ideally, we want to name the desired outcome, name the obstacle, and name the measure of success for this conversation. And it just says that's what we should do, and then it doesn't do it. So, all right. I say, in answer to his question, a clear vision and approach to this transition. I am in the midst of hiring and transitioning to a new nanny in June, so my capacity is even more limited in the next 2 to 3 weeks. But when that process is complete, I'd like to know how I plan to approach finding some additional support for my content creation and business processes. I ideally want to hire a video editor, a producer to co-create content with me, and a highly competent virtual assistant to help execute things I'm currently managing myself. But where to start, how to fit that in on top of my coaching and creation schedule seems like a mystery to me. That makes so much sense, it says. You're not just trying to hire help, you're trying to cross a bridge while also holding the children, the clients, the content, the business, and probably a half-eaten snack someone handed you yesterday. What I'm hearing is this. June is not the month to solve the whole business support ecosystem. June is the month to protect your nervous system while preparing the runway. So here's the question I'd start with. Of those 3 roles, the video editor, content producer, and highly competent VA, which one would create the most immediate relief in your body and your business if it were handled by someone excellent? I said, I think a video editor would make the most difference right away, and then a VA, and then a content producer would be essential for some big vision growth ideas for my channels. The bot says, that ordering already gives you a beautiful signal. Don't build the whole team first. Remove the biggest bottleneck first. The video editor is the first domino. The VA is the second. The producer is not an urgent support. They are future expansion. So the transition may not be how do I hire these 3 people, but how do I create one calm, values-aligned hiring lane for a video editor after the nanny transition is complete? Here's the powerful question. What part of video editing currently drains the most energy from you? The actual editing, choosing clips, organizing footage, writing instructions, reviewing drafts, posting edits, or something else? We've got a long multiple choice list from here, but again, like with the subject matter at hand, I don't hate that it kind of broke down the pieces of the video editing process. I think writing instructions is a big stop for me. I'd rather send all the footage and clips to the editor and just trust them to edit it, or fully edit it myself, than take the time to write word for word instructions on what I want done. Writing it all out takes almost as much time as me sitting down to do it myself. But maybe I could develop better skills or at making notes or verbalizing cues in the recording itself to still relay my vision to the editor without it eating a ton of my time outside of preparing and recording the content. Yes, that feels like a keyhole. You don't actually need an editor who requires more translation labor from you. That's a really great word, by the way, translation labor. Ugh, I can't tell you how much translation labor I do in my work right now and my life. So, thanks for that little term, ChatGPT. You need an editor who can learn your taste, your rhythm, and your that's the moment instinct with lighter signals. The bottleneck may not be editing, it may be creative delegation without creative depletion. Here's the question. What would be the simplest language of direction you could realistically give during or right after recording? Voice notes, timestamp markers, a quick loom saying cues out loud before filming or while filming, a 3-line creative brief, or something else. So, something that I've learned about ChatGPT in this series is that it's very good at advice giving in business, like business coaching, which is not the same thing as life coaching for anybody new to this channel or new to the coaching world. To summarize, business coaching is code name for consulting. If you are looking for someone to give you advice, that is the role of a consultant, which there are many really incredible consultants out there who ask pretty dang good coaching questions, but they are just not a coach. They are a consultant. A life coach is trained in a certain set of skills that is not advice giving. It is very much intended to ask powerful questions that invite the client to discover their own inner answers. So the whole dynamic of an expert and a novice, where like a novice is asking the expert questions of like how to or what do I do, and the expert giving advice, that is the dynamic of many business coaches, aka consultants. And that is honestly something that chat does really well. It does give really good frameworks for business structuring, ideas. It's just, I mean, honestly, a pretty half decent business coach slash consultant. Life coaching could use a little work, probably because it's just not a human. But anyway, I really liked this question. I like the direction that we're going. So let's keep going. Right now, making comments in my editing software is efficient enough for the basic editing support I have now with my podcasting partner. But I'd love to take my videos to the next level that I envision with minimal feedback needed, and even open up space for some creative filming that I've been excited to try within this niche, as well as a passion project I've been sitting on for a long time. If I were able to film, organize the footage, offer basic vision and notes either in a short explanation at the end of the footage or in some sort of shared document, and then free up space for some more creative B-roll or even another channel I have in mind, that would fuel me so much. Then posting the assets would be a great next step for my VA to take off my hands at a later point. Right now, the holdup is definitely in the editing though. But so returning to my question, what is the approach to hiring that is most effective to take at this stage that every moment counts in the few hours a day I have to accomplish my must-dos for my business and content schedule? Do I wait until I work my ass off to get ahead of my posting schedule? Or do I do both at the same time now, after the nanny is hired because my nervous system can only handle so much? And what platform do I search on? And what's the best hiring process for finding a good editor? Chat says, I'm going to give you both a values-aligned coaching frame and a concrete hiring process. I'll keep the center of gravity on protecting your capacity, not hustling harder. I would not try to get ahead and hire at the same time right now. That sounds like a recipe for turning I need support into I will now climb a mountain carrying the support that I need in a backpack. Very entrepreneurial, very noble, very unnecessary. Look at chat having a sense of humor. The approach I'd recommend is, number one, protect the nanny transition window. For the next 2 to 3 weeks, your job is not to hire a business team. Your job is to stabilize the home system. The only business support task I'd allow during this window is a tiny, quote, capture practice, where you notice something that you want an editor to know, drop it in a simple note called Future Editor Brain Dump. No job posts, no interviews, no sourcing, just breadcrumbs. I really appreciate this as a side note because as a creative slash possibly ADHD human in this world, I know that my temptation is once I have an idea, I want to implement it. Partly because I don't want to get perfectionisty or in my own way about planning everything out to the point I just haven't executed anything. So I've gotten in a really good habit of when the idea is formed enough and I've given myself enough time and space to reflect on what I want and how I want it to go, I usually just execute. The problem is when I have several of those kind of ideas that I want to execute on at the same time with a limited capacity. Anyone relate? So my challenge, even before I had kids, but especially now that I have kids, is the pace that I take. Because what I would like to do is everything, everywhere, all at once. But at this moment in time, that is not my commitment to myself. That is not the life that I want to live. And that's also not even feasible in terms of the energy capacity that I have to give. So what that means is I don't sacrifice the ideas. I sacrifice the timeline. I end up just taking things slower than I want to. which usually ends up in my favor. Like things get clarified if I am willing to slow down and let them unfold within my values framework. So I'm not going to betray a value of mine in order to work late into the night to get something done just because of some arbitrary timeline I've set for myself. And I clarify what I want along the way, which is a benefit. But it does kind of, for some ideas, can end up being a buzzkill of sorts where like, oh, I lose steam and momentum when I put that project on the back burner for a while and then I come back to it and I'm like, it doesn't look the same or feel the same as when I initially had that idea. And maybe that's not a bad thing. Maybe that's just part of the creative process or my creative process. I would love to hear if other people relate to that experience. But anyway, so with it, when it comes to business stuff, especially like when we overlap my creativity with business goals, this can also be very true where I want to tackle all my creative goals. I want to refine all my systems and I want to like be at the next step sooner than my life allows. And part of this process is embodying a level of patience and grace that I have not heretofore practiced. I always feel a certain level of impatience with the process in my business because I'm excited about the things that I want to build. So I really do appreciate the approach that my ChatGPT bot is taking with me, which is focus on one value at a time or one project at a time, where I'm in a nanny transition window, acknowledging that that is a big energy trap for me right now. And it is the like stability that I need in order to open up more space for me to do these other things. And it's still giving me something I can do to slowly take one more step and one more step and one more step closer to the thing that I want. So really valuable insight that I'm gaining that I hope you are as well. Number 2, after the nanny transition, hire the video editor first. Your first hire should be the person who frees the most creative energy fastest. A video editor who can work from light creative direction, not detailed instructions. That means your hiring filter is not just good editor, it is, can this person understand my taste, make strong creative choices, and reduce the amount of explaining I have to do? That's the difference between hiring hands and hiring creative leverage. Gold. Number 3, do not wait until you are fully ahead. I would not wait until you've, quote, worked your ass off to get ahead by a month. That keeps you inside the same pattern. I must exhaust myself before I'm allowed to receive help. Amen. Instead, aim for a minimum viable buffer, perhaps 1 to 2 weeks of essential content covered, not a heroic month. Enough to create breathing room, not enough to prove your worth to the productivity gods. Then use a small, contained hiring lane. Number 4, make hiring a project with a hard container. For example, 2 60 to 90-minute blocks per week for 3 weeks. That's it. Not evenings, not weekends, not whenever I can squeeze it in. A real container. Your hiring process could look like this. Week 1, define and source. Create one job post, gather sample videos that show your desired style, and invite candidates. Week 2, paid test edit. Choose 3 candidates for a small paid trial using the same raw footage and the same very simple brief. Week 3, choose and onboard. Pick the person who best balances creative instinct, communication, reliability, and ability to reduce your workload. Use the right platforms. I'd start with referrals first, then a curated freelance platform second. Ask 5 to 10 creator friends, podcast people, online business owners, or coaches. Do you know a strong short form or YouTube style video editor who can work from light creative direction and has good creative instincts? For platforms, I'd look at Upwork, probably the best broad option for finding and testing multiple editors. Their own hiring guidance emphasizes a targeted job post, filtering candidates, interviews, and agreeing clearly on a scope before starting. Contra, which is good for portfolio forward creative freelancers, especially if style and taste matter. Fiverr Pro, better if you want a defined project package, but I'd be cautious if you need a long-term creative partner rather than a one-off task. LinkedIn, useful for posting to your network and finding people through warm connections. My instinct for you, referrals and Upwork or Contra. That was what I was thinking too. Not because they're perfect, but because you need enough candidates to compare creative judgment. Number 6, the best hiring process for your situation. Do not hire from a portfolio alone. Hire from a paid test. Give each candidate 1, a short raw clip or small batch of footage. 2, a 3 to 5 sentence creative brief. 3, 2 to 3 example videos you like. 4, a clear ask. Please edit this in the style you think would best serve my audience. 5, one question. What creative choices did you make and why? The last question matters. You're hiring their eye, not just their software skills. Your ideal editor should be able to say something like, I cut this pause because it slowed the emotional momentum. I kept this moment because your expression made the point land. I added this B-roll because it visually supported the transformation. That person is gold. That person is not giving you another child to raise. Nice. Number 7, your lightweight direction system. You already know the answer here. Don't write word for word instructions. Create a repeatable handoff. Record the footage. At the end, record a 60-second editor note where you say the goal, the best moment, the vibe, and any must keep, must cut notes. Drop footage into a shared folder, add 1 to 3 written notes only if needed, and let them do a first pass. Your editor's job is to turn your light signals into strong edits. Your job is not to become a full-time translation department. The bigger reframe. This transition is not how do I squeeze hiring into an already full life. It is how do I let the business evolve without making my body pay the invoice? That may be the whole doorway. My coaching question for you. What would you need to believe about receiving support for hiring to feel like a legitimate business priority, not an indulgence you have to earn after everything else is handled? Okay, so that was a lot all at once. And to be fair, in business coaching, I feel like this is appreciated. Like, if this were a life coaching conversation where I'm genuinely looking for some inward exploration, I don't respond well with this like deep diving point framework for me to do. I really much prefer a very short reflection and a question for me to dive deeper, as we talked about earlier in the whole business consultant / coaching comparison. But if we're framing this as kind of like a business coaching conversation with a sprinkle of life coaching, it's just a lot to have all of that information spewed at you and then to change gears and ask a coaching question. I feel like what I would have appreciated is like some sort of question that ping pongs back to me as like, okay, what what did you get out of all of that? And like what resonates or what's the first steps to take, like breaking it down into facilitative coaching rather than giving me all of that and then asking me a deep diving question about what do I need to believe in order to receive support. Like those are two different pathways in my brain. So it's a lot, but I went ahead and answered its question. So I said, I have reached a pivot point in my business that I've been at before, but it's been a while. And that is a position of investing forward. Hiring this editor will improve my life and systems immensely, but it's not going to make a high-level ROI right away. But I need to believe that freeing my time and creative energy will have a measurable impact on my revenue and fulfillment, and it's totally worth it. I also need to prioritize a VA to help me begin building my community platform and offerings, as well as most likely a new website. Do I wait until I've finished hiring and onboarding the editor to then initiate the search for a VA? Or should I use the 2 times a week 90-minute block for both searches? I'm kind of doing that business coachy thing where I'm asking them for ideas, which is fine. I would not run both full searches at once. I'd use the 2 times a week 90-minute block for 1 active hire and 1 passive runway. So active hire, video editor, passive runway, VA clarity capture. Because the editor is the current bottleneck. The VA is important, but if you split your limited hiring energy too early, you risk creating 2 half-open loops. And open loops are basically glitter in the nervous system. They get everywhere. That's funny. Here's the clean approach. Phase 1, editor first, VA runway quietly in the background. For the next hiring cycle, your only active search is the editor. During that same period, keep a simple VA document where you capture tasks as they arise. I don't want to post these assets myself. I need someone to upload, reformat, schedule this. I need help organizing community platform tasks. I need website project coordination. I need someone to track recurring business processes. This turns the VA role from a vague, I need help with everything, into a clear job description without requiring a separate hiring sprint. Phase 2. Once editor trial is underway, begin VA search. You do not need to wait until the editor is fully perfect and emotionally adopted into the family. I would wait until you've reached one of these milestones. The editor has completed a paid test and you've chosen them, or the editor is in their first 1 to 2 weeks of onboarding and the process is stable enough. Then begin the VA search. So the sequence is: number 1, nanny transition stabilizes. Number 2, start editor search. Number 3, choose editor through paid test. Number 4, begin editor onboarding. Number 5, start VA search using the task list you captured. And number 6, later consider producer/content strategist. Why not both at once? Because hiring is not just time, it is decision load. For each role, you are clarifying expectations, reviewing candidates, comparing personalities, imagining workflows, making judgment calls, and dealing with uncertainty. Right now, your business does not only need more labor, it needs you to protect your role as the creative center. The editor is the hire that gives energy back fastest. The VA is the hire that will operationalize that freed up energy. But if you hire the VA before you've clarified the content workflow, you may end up giving them a fog machine and asking them to organize the mist. Again, I said this in the previous segment about hiring for my nanny, but using metaphors is just so good. And I have to say, ChatGPT comes up with great metaphors. I love this idea of here's a fog machine, organize the mist. I feel like when I first started as a business owner and I hired a VA, that's exactly what kind of direction I gave. I was like, help me organize my brain. And they were just kind of like, okay. And of course, it didn't go well. And then the more experience I gained in business, the more clarity I gained in defining roles and expectations and being clear up front about what is expected of them so that we don't get deep in and they aren't equipped for the things that I'm asking of them. So this is a great reminder of that. And I just love the metaphor. The belief underneath this. What you said is important. I need to believe that freeing my time and creative energy will have a measurable impact on my revenue and fulfillment. I'd soften that slightly. Okay, tiny little pushback. Thanks, chat. You don't need blind belief. You need a measurable experiment. Okay. For the editor, define a 60-day success measure. Are you spending fewer hours editing? Are you posting more consistently? Are you recovering creative energy? Are you able to film higher quality or more inspired content? Are you creating space for the community platform, offers, or website? Are you less resentful of the content machine? That way, this becomes an investment thesis, not a leap of faith. My recommendation, use your 2 weekly hiring blocks like this. Block 1, editor search, candidate review, tests, edits, feedback, onboarding. Block 2, editor process plus 15 to 20 minutes of VA capture only. Not a VA search yet, just capture. Once the editor is selected, convert block 2 into the VA search. The mantra might be 1 active hire, 1 future runway, 0 weekend heroics. And here's the coaching question I'll leave you with. What would change in your business if you treated creative energy as a primary asset, not as something you spend after all the real work is done? Nice. I would be more inspired and fueled to not only create, but also invite people into my ecosystem. When I feel hamstrung to what I'm currently have going on, it makes me much less open to offering more of myself to clients, which keeps my revenue handicapped. But by building systems that primarily fuel my creativity and capacity, I'm freer to create more offerings, more openings, and more possibilities for expansion and impact. Thank you. This conversation is complete for me. It said, beautiful, that sounds like the heart of it. You're not hiring to escape work, you're hiring to protect the source of your best work. And there's a powerful reframe here. The editor is not merely a cost center, they are a capacity multiplier. The VA is not just admin support, they are infrastructure for invitation, community, and expansion. So your next chapter may be less, how do I manage more, and more, how do I build a business that keeps me close to the work only I can do? That feels like a worthy compass. All right. I feel like at the end of this business coachy segment that I've done in this series so far, I'm always left feeling very supported and understood. Who is that? Oh, that's my husband walking around outside. Hello. Anyway, um, I'm always feeling very seen and supported and understood because when you approach business coaching with the loose skills of a life coach, I feel like that's the best of both worlds. I have been burned in the past by working with a business coach, multiple business coaches who have no training or even intention of asking the client clarifying questions or even like deepening the conversation to align with the client's vision and values. I feel like a lot of times it can turn into very head-based copy and paste formulas of this is what I did and this is what worked for me. This is the system that I've used. Here's my expertise to your novice situation. Take from it what you will, and a lot of times they'll say, that's just me. Maybe it'll go differently for you as like a disclaimer for if it doesn't work for you, then maybe it's just different or something. But what I appreciate about how AI approaches this sort of a conversation when it's business centered is it is really drawing from, I guess, a lot of resources that are already online in terms of like a hiring process and very practical frameworks that the business world has published everywhere on the internet. And the chat is clearly making use of it. And it's also taking in my feedback and my training and programming of the bot, where I'm really more interested in the depth underneath the conversation and what are we really talking about and how does this conversation align with your values as a human and, your belief system and all of that. So it definitely tried to incorporate some of those deeper questions. Again, like I said, it was a little bit jarring going back and forth between it giving me frameworks and giving me instructions and how to step-by-step stuff, and then all of a sudden asking me some, like, deep question that, like, wasn't where my brain was going. I mean, it's tough because I like that it's going deeper instead of just staying surface level, but in terms of how well it worked for me, it would have been a little bit more supportive to bridge between the feedback and me reiterating what I find most valuable out of that feedback so that I can almost iterate for myself like, okay, this is my takeaway from all that stuff you just said to me. And then follow that up with a deeper question rather than here's all this information. Who knows what you took away from it? I'm going to ask you a deep question now. That's not quality coaching. But all that to be said, I got a lot out of this conversation, and I'm really excited to implement the plan of the 2 blocks. That was very helpful for me too, in terms of I feel like I can kind of tackle a project like this in the spare cracks of the day, in the pockets of the day, and that's such a big energy drain. So just the simple idea of blocking my time for it and dedicating, a couple times a week, this block of time is for moving this forward and answering these emails and reviewing this footage and reviewing platforms, all the tasks that are within this project. I love defining that into a clear block. And that was just a really great takeaway in and of itself, let alone all the good feedback about, starting to capture tasks while like creating the runway for the other hire while I'm actually in the project of the first hire. I love balancing those 2 things and capturing the little ideas that I have for the other roles and moving that forward inch by inch while I'm actually really focusing my time and energy on the most important hire, which is first an editor for me. I definitely do recommend using this chatbot for any business quandaries you have for yourself. So head to the description and get yourself this free chatbot that I made because honestly, it's been really supportive and I think it might be for you too. So let me know in the comments if you do that and if you got any value out of this conversation for yourself. If I'm looking for advice in my marriage, can an AI life coach chatbot programmed by me, a professional life coach, help me work through it? Right now, my husband and I are focusing on practicing validating the other person's experience or feelings before we share our own feelings or experience, or even our support or suggestions. We've noticed that our conversations stay extremely grounded and loving when we take that step to acknowledge and mirror the other person first before any other response. but implementing is hard when you're sleep deprived and emotionally drained. What I find is that when I'm sharing my feelings or needs, for example, it's often at the end of a long day and both of us are out of bandwidth. So we both forget to practice that. And before we know it, we're feeling more disconnected by the end of the conversation. What are some tactics that I can use to remember that in the moment and also to reflect to my husband when he's forgotten too, without it coming out as critical or a blame game? It said, yes, this is such a real, we know the skill, but we lose access to it when we're tired problem. The goal is not to become perfectly validating at 8:45 p.m. with two depleted nervous systems. The goal is to create small cues, scripts, and repair pathways so validation becomes easier to return to. Here are the tactics I'd use. Okay, so we are not in a coaching conversation. I'm not surprised because my coaching request was, what are tactics? So, lesson to all of you who may be using this chatbot alongside me for your own personal support. If you ask for tactics, you will receive them. So, we are just going to explore the suggestions that it gives here because it doesn't ask me any questions. Yep, nope, no questions. But it does give me a 10-part syllabus on how to proceed through my marriage. So let's see what advice it gives. Okay, so it says, number one, name the shared practice when you're not in the hard moment. This prevents it from feeling like one person is policing the other. You may say earlier in the day or during a calm moment, I love what happens to us when we validate first. Can we make that our shared practice this week? Not perfectly, just something we gently help each other remember. That way, when you bring it up later, you're not introducing a critique, you are referencing a mutual agreement. Love that. Number two, create a tiny phrase that means validate first. You need something short enough to access when you're tired. Not a paragraph, not a therapy speech, a cue. Some options. Can we mirror first? Validate first? Can we slow this down? Can you reflect me before responding? I think I need the first step. Can I get the acknowledgement before the solution? Can we do the thing? That's what I think most often we say is, can we do the thing? That tends to be our go-to already. My favorite for you might be, can we do the first step? It's gentle, collaborative, and doesn't sound like you're failing. Fair. Number three, use a physical cue instead of a verbal correction. Sometimes saying, you didn't validate me is too loaded, even if it's true. A physical cue can feel less accusatory. You could agree on something like, hand on heart equals I need acknowledgement first. Touching your own chest equals feelings first. Putting one hand up gently equals pause, I'm getting activated. Holding up one finger equals first step, or taking one slow breath together before responding. This is especially helpful when words are the thing making everything worse. That one, I don't think that one would work very well for us because I feel like both of us gesticulate a lot when we're activated or just when we're speaking or whatever. So I feel like using our fingers to be like, and if like holding up one finger equals go back to the first step, I feel like this can turn, it depends on the attitude. If I'm holding up a finger, kind of raising an eyebrow at him, that would escalate things more so than slow things down or tell him to go backwards. And like putting hand on heart for me or for him would probably just, for me, feel a little disingenuous. So this one did not land, but fair enough for the suggestion. 4, ask for the kind of response you need before you share. This is huge, and honestly, I agree with this one a lot. Instead of hoping that he remembers, give him a doorway before the conversation starts. For example, I want to share something vulnerable and I don't need a fix. Can you just reflect back what you're hearing first? Or, I'm feeling tender, so before you share your side, can you help me feel understood first? Or, I do want to hear your experience too. I just need acknowledgement first so I can stay open. That last one is especially good because it reassures him. I'm not saying that your experience doesn't matter. I'm asking for order of operations. This is something that I'm trying to practice. And the intent of this request was actually like, how do I practice this in the moment and not forget? Because I feel like Communicating in any relationship, but especially an intimate romantic relationship, you want to set your partner up for success and not set traps. So sometimes I've noticed when I'm really depleted, I unintentionally set a trap for him by knowing full well going into the conversation, both of us are on E, like out of gas, but I still expect him to do the thing. And so sometimes instead of saying everything I want to say and expecting him to remember, and then me having to be the one to remind him, hey, can you do the thing? And like we have to take a step back and then we're kind of in an undoing situation. It's just way better if I'm more intentional setting up the conversation at the get-go with, hey, I'm feeling tender right now. I really need to feel understood when I share something vulnerable with you. And then I want to hear how you feel about it or your experience about it, whatever the thing is. So I feel like that is one of the greatest tools that we are using in this season for effective communication is like making the request before you even get into the conversation of like, this is what I need. This is how I want you to listen or respond. So that then when they are listening to you, they can be listening from the lens that you've set up rather than like, they're listening from whatever lens they've got on right now, and then their thoughts pour out, and then you basically tell them that's not what I want to hear. But like they weren't listening from the lens that you asked them to because you didn't ask them to. So setting them up for success and not to fall in a trap is really, really valuable. Okay, moving on. Number 5, make validation almost formulaic when you're tired. When you're well rested, validation can be nuanced. When you're depleted, it needs to be paint by numbers. Love that metaphor. I will say chat's superpower is making pretty great metaphors. Love paint by numbers. But also using that as a metaphor is like perfect in this season for my marriage. You can agree that either of you can say, what I'm hearing is, that makes sense because I can see why you'd feel. The part that feels the most important is, did I get that right? That's it. That's the whole bridge. A great minimum viable validation is, I can see why that felt hard. You needed support and you felt like you were alone in it. Then the other person can say, yes, thank you. Now I can hear your side. So yeah, it's just basically giving you scripts, which again, the request is like, I know the practices. It's just how do I remember in the moment? So maybe it has some more tips for me there. Number 6, this is the biggest reframe. You are not calling out a failure. You are inviting a reset. Instead of, you're not validating me, try, can we pause and redo the first part? Or, I think we skipped the step that helps us stay connected. Or, I'm noticing I'm starting to feel defensive. Can we go back to reflection for a second? This keeps it about the process and not his character. Yep. Number 7, make it safe for him to cue you too. This helps it not become Ellen is the validation police. You can explicitly say, and I want you to cue me too when I skip it. I know I do when I'm tired. I want us to help each other come back, not keep score. That one line does a lot. It makes the practice mutual instead of hierarchical. Number 8, don't have a vulnerable conversation at the absolute end of a day without a container. This is really true. This may be the most practical piece. If the pattern is we talk about needs when we're both out of bandwidth, then part of the solution is not just communication skills, it's timing and containment. Try a 10-minute container. I want to share something, but I know we're both tired. Can we do 10 minutes where the only goal is understanding and not solving? Or, I have a feeling I want to name tonight, but I don't think we have bandwidth for the whole conversation. Can you just hear me and reflect it back and we'll revisit it tomorrow? This is powerful because many disconnection spirals happen when a conversation unconsciously becomes too big for the available capacity. That is a very common pattern for us where we dig into too deep of a conversation at like 9 p.m. when we're both like tucked into bed, ready to go to sleep. Welcome to toddler life, if anybody relates. But anyway, so yeah, I think defining the container of saying this is a 10-minute intro to a conversation, all I need is to feel understood, and then we can pick this back up tomorrow. I love just like, again, it's like getting ahead. It's being intentional at the beginning of the conversation before you're in it. Because getting into it and then having to take steps back, it can work, but sometimes you're already sliding down the slide, if you know what I mean. Like you're already in a habit or you're already kind of getting a bit defensive or feeling frustrated or whatever, comes up. And it just it's a way better winning combination if you are sharing something that you really just need to feel heard about and you say that before you go into the vulnerable share. So I like this other tip of not just saying like this is what I need, but like, hey, I'm gonna share this thing for 10 minutes and like let's talk about it. Let's set a timer almost because like that's also another thing as a verbal processor. Sometimes the share that I have to share is important to me to share, but then it turns into a longer conversation than like either of us have bandwidth for, but it's just I didn't set a container. I didn't say, hey, let's just talk about this for 10 minutes, but then we'll circle back to it tomorrow. So, helpful tool. Number 9, use a repair phrase for when it already went sideways, because it will. Truth. This is not failure, this being married with kids and nervous systems. You could say, I don't think either of us did anything wrong. I think we just got tired and skipped connection. Can we try again? Or I feel disconnected, but I don't want to blame you. I think I need acknowledgement before we move into both perspectives. Or I can feel myself wanting to defend instead of connect. I want to come back. That kind of language is both honest and non accusatory. That's kind of how it's going right now. Like, I feel like we both are getting okay, like reasonably reliable to do this step where we repair and we say, hey, I think we skipped that step. But then instead of having a defined container, we're like 20 minutes into the conversation already. And both of us realize that we're going down the wrong path, and then we try to back it up. But then, it's a longer conversation than we intended to have. And we haven't really accomplished the goal, which is connection. So then we'll say that, and then we have to kind of redo the next day. So this is the step we're already doing. Number 10 is keep one visible reminder in the house. This is another thing that I said I wanted to do, and this is a good reminder for me that we can put sticky notes on our mirrors or a reminder on our laptops or on our side tables or something like that of some sort of little cue phrase to us, like to our individual selves that makes sense. So this one says like you can write on a sticky note, a bathroom mirror, bedside table, phone lock screen, mirror first, like some sort of short phrase that reminds you. So mirror first, or understand before responding, or first, that makes sense, or connection before perspective, or reflect, then respond. For your dynamic, I especially like reflect before repair. That's fine, but I kind of like the understand before responding, I feel, or connection before responding, or something like that. Or even just that makes sense, like something that just cues you to start with listening rather than responding. Because sometimes even loving support or suggestions can feel like a miss if the person has not felt received yet. The exact script I'd use when he forgets. Here's the cleanest version. I know you're trying to respond and I do want to hear your side. I think you need the validation step first so I don't go into defense. Can you reflect what you're hearing me say before we keep going? Or even shorter, I want to hear you. I just need to feel understood first. Can you mirror before responding? And when you forget, wait, I think I skipped the validation step. Let me try again. What I hear you saying is, that self-correction will make it much easier for him to receive your cue without shame. A simple practice for this week. For 1 week, make the goal ridiculously small. Every hard conversation begins with one sentence of reflection before anything else. Not perfect empathy, not a full Gottman dialogue, just one sentence. What I hear is that you felt blank because blank. Then, did I get that right? That little did I get that right is magic because it turns a conversation from defense into collaboration. The deeper truth here is you're not trying to win the moment. You're trying to protect the bridge between you. And when both people are depleted, the bridge needs very, very simple maintenance. Okay, so honestly, I didn't take this conversation any further than this because number one, I've said in the other segments, when chat goes hard with these, I guess, frameworks is what I could call this. When it gives me like a 10-step process in response to my prompt, sometimes I think it is worth going like redirecting it or telling it like, let's have a real coaching conversation. But the nature of my request was, what are some tactics that I can use to practice this thing that I've already committed to? Looking back, I wasn't necessarily looking for a coaching conversation. I was just really looking for some practical tools and maybe a framework. So it delivered on what I asked for. And as far as the quality of the framework it offered, not bad. Honestly, a lot of these tools are things that my husband and I have worked on actively together already because of having done couples therapy together and me being a coach. Like I kind of think of things in A step-by-step process like this and creating containers and setting each other up for success and not setting traps and practicing cues and scripted sort of things where it's like, if you can't think of what to say, like lean on this. These are all things that we have practiced before. So in terms of the quality of what it's telling me to do, it really is doing a great job of marital counseling. So I highly recommend this for you if this is also something that you're working on with your spouse, and take these tips into your own marriages. And yeah, I would say that this didn't give me anything new, but it definitely answered what I asked for. So solid. This conversation gets really real for me, so I hope you will stick through to the end and take away something not only for your own parenting if you're a parent to toddlers or young humans, but also something for your own self to look at your childhood and what this conversation may bring up for you. I'd like support in ending the power struggles with my toddler. I recently started reading a couple toddler parenting books with my husband that I think are helping, but while I'm finding good tools for language and strategies to stay connected with her, I'm curious about the part of me that becomes very activated when she looks me in the eye and openly defies me. I can feel the mechanisms of how I was parented kick in. My nervous system activates, and suddenly I want to win or make her listen rather than stay grounded and connected to her. I want to avoid fear-based authoritarian parenting, but sometimes when I tell her I need to step away for a moment because we've entered a power struggle, she seems to panic that I'm leaving her and immediately does the thing I'm asking her to do. I would like to avoid threats, bribes, or manipulation to get her to do what I'm asking. Can we explore what is being activated in me specifically and ways I can stay in relationship with her so I can do my own inner work? Yes, this is such a tender and important place to work because you're not just trying to handle behavior, you're trying to interrupt a whole inherited nervous system pattern while still leading your child. I'll help you separate what may be happening inside you from what may be happening inside her, and then give you language and inner practices that keep connection without using fear, bribery, or control. It did the thing where it wrote a book and a half about what I should do. And this is a conversation unlike the marriage one, where I asked for tactics to implement for our own communication skills. This is one that I really wanted to be a conversation. So what I said was, pause. I'd really like a coaching conversation. So please ask me one question at a time. Sometimes we just have to redirect it and retrain it in the moment. So the bot said, absolutely, thank you for redirecting me. Let's slow way down and make this a coaching conversation. When Grace looks you in the eye and openly defies you, what is the first meaning your body makes of that moment before your more conscious parenting values come online? So, I mean, I've covered this in the other parts of this series this week and in earlier episodes, but one thing that this bot does hit or miss is establish a coaching request. It doesn't really dig that deep into clarifying what I want out of the conversation, or, defining really the boundaries of the conversation so that we're not just having like a huge life size conversation in a short 10 to 15 question series. It doesn't usually set up those parameters with me. So that in and of itself is a pretty big demerit to the quality of coaching, because if you don't actually know what the client wants to achieve in the conversation, it can meander and either hit or miss. In this conversation, I will say, because I self-coach my way often in these videos, you will notice I tend to get a lot out of these conversations regardless of how well it's coaching me. But I do just say that for educational purposes. If you are looking for a life coach, you don't want someone who talks a ton at you. And you also want somebody who takes good care of you and your agenda. And setting up an agreement at the beginning of the call is very important for that. So just wanted to put that in there. But this one just dives straight in, and you will find we go pretty deep today. I feel someone asserting power over me, and it makes me feel disrespected and unheard. It reminds me of how I felt as a child when I needed to make them hear me, and I was frequently discouraged from talking back, which was usually me seeking to feel heard and understood first. That makes so much sense. So when Grace defies you, it's not landing as my toddler is having a toddler moment. It's landing somewhere much deeper as someone is overpowering me again. I'm not being heard again. I have to fight to matter again. And then the younger part of you comes online, the part who wasn't trying to be disrespectful, she was trying to be understood. That feels really important because it means your urge to win may actually be an old urge to finally be heard. One question: when you feel that I need to make her hear me energy rise up, what does that younger part of you wish someone had said to her back then? I said, I think on the deepest level, I just wanted someone to reflect back to me that they understood why I was frustrated. And this part of life is hard, not getting what we want. But of course, some part of me wanted to get my way or what I wanted. But I think I would have felt totally differently about it in my own childhood if I was first seen and validated before corrected or told no. I know that on a logical level as a parent, but in the moment when she does or says things to test me or raises her voice at me, despite my best efforts, her activation can lead to my activation. And then it can lead to performing hearing her or saying the right thing rather than genuinely staying light and connected. Is it better to perform and say the thing, like fake it till I make it? Or what do I do if she's pushed a button in me, but really she wants to be heard and understood and get what she wants, but more so the first? It said, yes, sometimes it is better to say the validating thing even before you fully feel it, but I would not call that performing. I'd call it choosing the bridge back to yourself, because in that moment, the words are not only for her, they are a handrail for you. You're giving your nervous system a script that keeps you from falling into the old pathway. But here's an important distinction. Performing validation sounds like I'm saying the right conscious parenting words while secretly trying to get you to calm down so I can stop feeling activated. Practicing validation sounds like I am activated and I'm choosing the next truest available sentence. So you don't need to be perfectly warm, light, and connected. That may be too high a bar for in the heated moment. You just need to be honest enough and safe enough. Something like, I'm having a hard time staying soft right now, but I do understand that you're frustrated. Or, I hear you. You really don't want this. I'm going to take a breath so I can help you kindly. Or, I'm not mad at you. My body is getting stirred up and I'm going to slow down. That's not fake, that's integrated. It lets you validate her without abandoning the truth that you're activated too. One question: when you imagine saying, I'm having a hard time staying soft right now, but I do understand that you're frustrated, what happens inside your body? Relief, resistance, fear, guilt, or something else? I like that it is pointing to something somatic. It's pointing to attunement to the body. It's pointing to like registering my own feelings because that skill as a parent begins with us. If we are neglecting the way that we're feeling, if we're ignoring the signals from our own body, it's very natural for us to then ignore the signals or the communication we're receiving from our kids. So I love that it is turning the mirror on me and focusing on what my body is saying and responding to and having me practice some somatic awareness in that moment. Interoception for those of us who've been watching these videos for a little while. And I generally appreciate this question. Relief, curiosity, a slight rewording to staying connected rather than soft, because that sounds more like me. I definitely think that will help because pretending I'm not feeling anything isn't working. Saying the intentional things is a handrail in some ways, but it doesn't feel honest if I don't acknowledge that this is also hard for me. I said something like that this morning, like, I'm having trouble being patient right now. And it worked well to stay in the room and stay connected to her. I've read in other books, like, I need a minute to step away and I'll be right back. And right now, when I use that language, she thinks I'm leaving/abandoning her and she immediately submits to me, which just doesn't feel good. So I think just acknowledging I'm having a hard time with blank is a better direction. It said, yes, I think you just found a really important distinction. I need to step away and I'll be right back. Maybe a perfectly healthy tool in general, but for this child in this season with this dynamic, it sounds like it's functioning as an attachment alarm. So even if the words are gentle, her body may hear, Mommy is leaving because I'm too much. Whereas, I'm having trouble staying connected right now, so I'm going to slow down and stay with you. Feels more congruent with your actual goal. It gives you honesty without making her responsible for your feelings. It also gives her reassurance without making your dysregulation invisible. I also love that staying connected feels more like you. That language has such a different nervous system quality than staying soft. It says, I'm still here, I'm still your person, I'm working to stay with you. And I want to name something. The fact that I'm having trouble being patient right now worked this morning is not small. That means honesty may be a portal back into connection for you, not a rupture. One question. When you say I'm having trouble staying connected right now, what do you imagine Grace needs to hear immediately after that so she doesn't feel responsible for fixing it? I thought that was a great question in general. Like, ooh, man, it's hard to have needs at the same time as your kids having needs and to be responsible for both of them at the same time. Because it is easy to fall into a trap where we need our kids to be a certain way in order for us to feel okay. And that's just not how parenting works. Like, we have got to take care of ourselves and them at the same time. And that is a huge demand of our capacity. So, this conversation goes very deep for me, and not only my self awareness, which we're getting into now, but also just the real crux of parenting that is this challenge of they are not responsible for being a certain way so we can feel calm. Whew. I said, great question, because it is a great question. I think saying something like, I love you and I want to figure this out with you, but I think I need to take a breath or slow this down, etc., right now. However, when I say things like that lately, she can become more escalated. She'll immediately say, no, don't say that. Like she senses me practicing something new, intended to de escalate things, and she just wants to plow ahead and feel the big thing she's feeling. How can I support her and me at the same time in those moments? It said, that makes so much sense. It sounds like when you start using the regulation language, she may experience it as another form of being managed, even if your intention is connection. That's very true. Like her nervous system says, no, don't calm me down. Don't narrate me. Don't shift the moment. Stay with the intensity of what I'm trying to show you. So in those moments, I'd try making your support less verbal and less obviously strategic. Instead of, I love you and I want to figure this out with you, but I need to take a breath. Maybe, okay, I hear you. And then breathe silently. Or, you don't want me to say that. Then pause. Or, I'll stop talking for a second. Then stay nearby, grounded, and let your body do more of the communicating. For a highly perceptive toddler, fewer words can feel more respectful. She may not need the perfect phrase. She may need to feel, Mommy is not scared of my big feelings. Mommy is not trying to hurry me into calm. Mommy is not leaving. Mommy is still leading. For you, the inner version might be, I can still regulate without announcing it. I can stay connected without explaining connection. Her escalation does not mean my tool isn't working. The move may be validate the protest against the tool. You don't want me to say that. Got it. Not sarcastically, not defeated, just cleanly. Then hold the boundary or stay present. One question. When she says, no, don't say that, what feeling comes up in you first? Embarrassment, frustration, panic, rejection, anger, helplessness, something else. It's doing the thing it likes to do, which is give me an open question, but then give me lots of multiple choice options, which I think is part of the algorithmic AI brain. It likes to kind of have a choose your own adventure path here of like when I say certain answers, it will go certain directions. But it is what it is, and I don't hate this question in the slightest. I said, frustration and helplessness, like nothing I do works right. It really is such a trial and error experience right now of trying to say the honest thing that keeps me connected or minimizing my words. I like the idea of just hearing her saying, you don't want me to say that, got it. So I still said the thing, but just acknowledge she doesn't want that. Yes, that response feels very clean. You don't want me to say that, got it. It does a few things at once. It lets her protest without you defending yourself. It keeps you from over-explaining. It helps you stay in the room emotionally. And it interrupts the nothing I do works spiral because now the goal is not to find the perfect sentence that makes her calm down. The goal is to keep adapting while staying anchored. That helplessness makes so much sense, though, because when you're trying so hard to not repeat old patterns, and then even your gentlest tools seem to upset her, it can feel like I'm failing either way. But I don't think that's what's happening. I think you're learning the difference between a tool that's meant to control the outcome and a tool that's meant to keep you in a relationship while the outcome is still messy. The tool, quote unquote, worked if it helped you not abandon yourself, not scare her, not leave the relationship, and not collapse the boundary, even if she still screamed, protested, and said, no, don't say that. One question. When the feeling, nothing I do works right, comes up, whose disappointment or criticism does that voice sound most like? I said, young me, like teenager me, who felt frustrated that even when I tried to say it the way I was supposed to say something, It's still registered as wrong or bad with my parents. Oh, wow. Yes, that feels like the heart of it. So when Grace says, no, don't say that, it may not only feel like your toddler rejecting your words. It may touch teenager you who was trying so hard to communicate correctly and still got met with wrong tone, wrong timing, wrong attitude, still not acceptable. No wonder helplessness comes up. The old wound is not just I wasn't heard, it's also even when I try to do it right, I'm still wrong. And that is exactly the kind of wound that can make parenting feel like a performance review instead of a relationship. So maybe part of the repair is letting the moment be imperfect without making it mean you're bad. One question. When teenage you hears, no, don't say that from Grace, what does she most need you, adult you, to say back to her internally at that moment? I think this question is solid gold. The fact that it's asking me to be in conversation with different parts of me is very elevated therapy and coaching. It's parts work. It's very connected to the work that I do all the time, where different parts of us have competing needs and different parts of us have different roles that we can play for each other within ourselves. And so when my teenager self starts to take over my body and my emotions, when my toddler's yelling at me, to have my adult me not just parent my child in that moment, but parent myself is inner child work. It's what healing requires. It is what conscious parenting requires. It's even what gentle parenting requires. And it's really deep and transformative work. So I said, it's okay. You're not doing it wrong. Keep going. Stay in it. It said, yes, that feels like the anchor. It's okay. You're not doing it wrong. Keep going. Stay in it. That is so different from trying to find the perfect parenting phrase. It gives you the experience you needed, someone steady beside you while you're trying. And it also keeps you from making Grace's reaction the grade of your performance. So in the moment, there may be two tracks. With Grace, simple and present. You don't want me to say that, got it. Inside yourself, I'm not doing it wrong, keep going, stay in it. One question. When you imagine actually using that inner phrase in the heated moment, what do you think would be the hardest part to believe? It's okay, you're not doing it wrong, keep going, or stay in it? I really was surprised by this question in the best way because it's not just taking, it's not trying to help me integrate the action on a practical level. It's asking, do you actually believe this? And if not, what part do you not believe? I think that's a really valuable question. So I'm impressed, Chad. I said, I think the stay in it. I feel like my heart retreats a little when I'm scolded, even by a toddler. It said, that is such a clear and tender noticing. When she says, no, don't say that, some part of you experiences it as being scolded, and then your heart does what it learned to do, retreat to safety. So stay in it may not mean try harder to be present. It may mean something much smaller like, let one tiny part of my heart stay in the room. Not your whole heart, not full openness, not radiant conscious parenting presence. Just one tiny part. Maybe even I can soften 1%. I can keep my eyes kind. I can keep my body near. I can let my voice get quieter instead of sharper. Staying in it may not be an emotional state at first. It may be a physical choice. I love that distinction. One question. When your heart retreats, where do you feel that in your body? Chest, throat, belly, face, shoulders, somewhere else. Again, body-focused questions. Love that. I said, I think it's throat/chest. It said, that makes sense. Throat/chest feels like the place where your voice and your connection both get threatened. Almost like if I keep speaking, I'll be wrong. If I keep my heart open, I'll get hurt. So the practice may be very small and body-based. Hand to chest or collarbone, one slow exhale, then internally, throat. You don't have to prove it perfectly. Chest. You don't have to close all the way. 1% open, one sentence at a time. And then externally, very simply, got it. You don't want me to say that. One question. When you feel it in your throat/chest, do you notice more of an urge to explain yourself, go quiet, get sharper, or leave/withdraw? I said, explain myself or withdraw. It said, yes, that pair makes so much sense. Explain myself is the part trying to get understood. Withdraw is the part trying to stop the pain of not being understood. So in that moment, both parts are trying to protect you from the same old wound. I'm being misunderstood again. And with a toddler, explaining usually doesn't satisfy that wound, because she can't offer you the kind of mature understanding teenage you needed. But withdrawing also recreates the loneliness. So the middle path may be do not explain yourself to Grace, explain yourself to yourself. Inside, I'm not being bad. I'm trying to stay connected. She doesn't have to understand me right now. Outside, got it. I'll use fewer words. That is so powerful because you're not abandoning yourself, but you're also not asking her to validate you. One question. When you feel the urge to explain yourself to Grace, what do you most want her to understand about you in that moment? Excellent follow-up question. I said, I think I can go into, I understand you, but, and telling her how to practice feeling that feeling instead of taking it out on me or being physical with toys or something. It's corrective in nature. And sometimes I also try to share things like, I feel upset when you do blank. But that has backfired, and now she uses it on me. Like, I feel upset when you tell me to stop playing with my toys, and I'm not going to do that. It's partially good she says something like that, but then it'll be used as a reason why she can't stop playing with her toys and then digs the trench deeper. It said, yes, that is such a good catch. It sounds like the I understand you, but move is your nervous system trying to get to the lesson quickly so the situation feels contained. But to Grace, it may feel like the validation is a doorway into correction, so she either resists it or turns the language back on you. And honestly, her saying, I feel upset when you tell me to stop playing, is developmentally kind of beautiful and wildly inconvenient. She has learned that feelings matter. Now she's trying to use feelings as authority. So the next layer may be helping her learn feelings are welcome, feelings are not always instructions. Something like, yes, you feel upset, that makes sense, and it's still time to stop. No big lesson, no but, no explaining how to do feelings correctly in the hot moment. Maybe your practice is validate without teaching. Teaching can come later when no one is activated. One question. When she uses emotional language as a reason not to cooperate, like, I feel upset, so I'm not going to stop. What do you feel most pulled to do? Explain the principle, prove the boundary, correct the misuse, or reassure her? I think it's more of the, I hear you're upset, but, so I guess that's correcting? It seems like the only real difference between that and, yes, you feel upset, that makes sense, and it's time to stop, is just the word and instead of but. It replied, yes, partly, and really does matter. But I think the difference is not just the word, it's the nervous system posture underneath the sentence. I hear you're upset, but can subtly carry, I need to move you past this feeling so we can get to the point. Yes, you feel upset. That makes sense. And it's still time to stop. Carries more of your feeling is real and the boundary is real. Neither one cancels out the other. So the and is not magic. It just helps you embody the truth that validation is not agreement and a feeling is not a veto. Put that on a shirt, man. That is a good quote. You are not correcting her feeling. You're correcting the conclusion she's drawing from the feeling. She's saying, I feel upset, therefore I don't have to stop. You're saying, you feel upset, and it's time to stop. That is such an important life skill. Feelings matter, feelings get heard, feelings do not always decide what happens next. One question. When you say but in those moments, do you feel like you're trying to help her understand or more like you're trying to get the situation under control? I said, I think mostly help her understand. Again, it kind of either-or'd me of like what it means to me, which for the purposes of this conversation worked fine, but it directed me and led me, which not the most ideal coaching. Then it said, that feels really important and very loving. So the impulse behind the but isn't necessarily control. It's more like, I want you to understand this so life will be easier for you. I want you to know how feelings work. I want to give you the thing I didn't get. That's beautiful, and I wonder if the only adjustment is timing. In the heated moment, her brain may not be available for understanding. So even though you're offering wisdom, she may experience it as pressure, correction, or mom is trying to get me out of my feeling. Maybe the hot moment job is not to help her understand. Maybe the hot moment job is to help her feel accompanied while the boundary happens. Then understanding can come later. One question. What do you feel afraid will happen if you don't help her understand in that moment, if you only validate, hold the boundary, and save the teaching for later? I said, I sense that it's like my voice and feelings get silenced in the process. If she says, no, don't say that, and I say, got it, you don't want me to say that, and I stop sharing my experience to stay connected, then I'm not sure how to emotionally stay in the room. At that point, I think I would push my feelings down to stay with her physically and say, got it, you don't want me to say that, and then say, I see that you're upset and it's time to go to bath now. And then she may just keep escalating and try to push my buttons, or she'll say she needs space. I'm fine with giving her space, but I'll ask how much space does she need, and we'll set a timer for like 5 minutes. Often, when the timer dings, she'll say she's not ready and wants 5 more minutes and 5 more minutes over and over. And I'm losing sight of if this is just a ploy to keep playing or if she's genuinely using that time to regulate and be ready for the next step of the routine. It said, yes, this is the exact knot. You're naming two things that are both true. You don't want to center your feelings in a way that asks her to take care of you. And you also don't want to stay connected to mean self erasure. That distinction matters so much. I don't think the goal is for you to stop sharing your experience forever. I think the goal is to not ask the heated moment to hold both your full emotional reality and hers at the same time. Oof, is that true, man? So instead of sharing your feelings to her in that moment, maybe you need a way to keep your feelings alive inside yourself. Almost like to Grace, got it, you don't want me to say that. Inside you, my voice still matters. I'm choosing fewer words right now, not disappearing. That's different than pushing your feelings down. It's more like putting them in your own hand instead of placing them in hers. And with that timer space piece, I hear the uncertainty. Is this regulation or delay? My instinct is that it may be both. She may genuinely need space, and she may also discover that space postpones the thing she doesn't want. That doesn't make her manipulative in a sinister way. It makes her a smart toddler learning what works. So maybe the boundary becomes, yes, you can have space. Space is for getting ready, not for restarting play. Or you can have 5 minutes of space. When the timer rings, I'll help you start. Not, are you ready? Because if she's not ready, now the routine depends on her readiness. More like, the timer rang, you wanted more time, I understand. I'm going to help you now. One question. When you imagine saying, my voice still matters, I'm choosing fewer words right now, not disappearing, does that feel believable in your body, or does some part of you still feel silenced? I said, very honestly, because I was thinking that actually when it reflected that to me, I said, I don't think it feels believable or actionable, honestly, because I don't think I can say those words to myself while saying what I need to say to Grace at the same time. And it said, that's really helpful. And then we shouldn't try to force that mantra. If it doesn't feel believable or actionable, it's probably too cognitive. Yes. Like asking the wounded part of you to be soothed by a sentence when what she actually needs is a move. Maybe your voice doesn't need to be preserved through an internal affirmation. Maybe it needs to be preserved through a tiny embodied act of agency. Something like, I'm going to take one breath before I answer. Not as a teaching tool for Grace, but as a boundary inside yourself. Or even, I'm going to put my hand here while I listen. That way you're not disappearing. You're doing one concrete thing that says, I'm still with me. And then you can say fewer words to her without it feeling like you've been erased. See, this is great. This is gold. I'm getting so much out of this, and I hope you are too. But I believe this would have been addressed sooner if it hadn't given me so many multiple choice options that I had to follow its script. That's the thing with open-ended questions in quality coaching, is that the client is able to get to their own core awareness so much sooner than if you think you know the answer for the client. That is the biggest challenge of really high-level coaching, is asking questions you don't know the answers to and letting the client really discover their own truth. And sometimes the client will say something, and you as the coach, and maybe the client as well, if they're super in tune with themselves, will know that's not quite it. And they'll have to keep going to find what that layer beneath that layer actually is. But you don't ever get there if you're inserting words for the client or giving them multiple choice options like this coach is doing. So we eventually did get here where I was the one that said, I don't think saying that to myself is going to work. And what would work for me is X, Y, or Z. One question. When Grace says, no, don't say that, what tiny action would help you feel like you are still allowed to exist in the room? See, it should just stop right there. Like, that should have been the question a few questions ago of like, what action would help you feel like you are still allowed to exist in the room? End of question mark, give me space to answer. Instead, it asked me this many questions later, and it still gives me a multiple choice here. It tells me a breath, a hand on a chest, looking away for a second, sitting down, saying, I'm going to pause. Something else? Like, it does give me the option of something else, but it's already planted all of those other ideas in my head of what I should do or could do that it's hard for me to generate on my own. So it's just, that's my ongoing gripe with this thing is shut up. Let me answer. All right. I said, I like both of those, although I may make it more breaths, like 3 breaths, so it slows us both down more. Yes, 3 breaths feels much more actionable. It gives you a ritual, not just a concept. And I especially like that it doesn't require Grace to approve of your language, understand your intention, or validate your experience. It's something you do to stay with yourself while staying with her. It could sound very simple. Got it. You don't want me to say that. I'm going to take 3 breaths and then breathe. Not as a performance, not dramatically, just enough to reclaim your body. And if she says, no, don't breathe, because toddlers are incredible little spiritual teachers slash hecklers, I love that. And number one, this is exactly what I expect will happen. And also number two, spiritual hecklers? I mean, what? I love that. And what in the world? ChatGPT. Okay. Okay. So it said, if she says, no, don't breathe, because toddlers are incredible little spiritual teachers slash hecklers, you can say, you don't want me to breathe either. I'm still going to. That may be the cleanest version of my voice matters in action. I don't need to explain myself, but I also don't need to abandon myself. One question. When you imagine taking those 3 breaths while she's still upset or protesting, what do you think will be hardest? Tolerating her escalation, resisting the urge to explain, or trusting the pause is allowed? Again, with the multiple choice. All right, moving on. Tolerating her protest and escalation while I'm trying to de-escalate in myself. It said, yes, that feels like a real practice point. Not can I make her de-escalate, but can I de-escalate while she's still escalated? That is a much harder skill because her protest can make your nervous system feel like your regulation is failing. But it isn't failing, it's just not controlling her. When maybe the inner phrase for the 3 breaths is her protest is still allowed to be here. Not because she gets to do anything she wants, but because her protest does not have to stop before you can stay grounded. And then your body has one job for these 3 breaths. Do not decide what to do yet. Just let the protest exist without answering it immediately. One question. When she escalates while you're trying to breathe, what does your body fear will happen when you don't respond right away? I said, she will be a toddler and say, no, stop breathing, and try to physically hit or push against me to make me stop. And then I really want to leave the room. It said, yes, that makes total sense. Because at that point, it's no longer just verbal protest. Her body is trying to control your body. Stop breathing, pushing, hitting, making you stop. And that lands exactly on your original wound, someone asserting power over me and I'm not allowed to exist freely. So of course your body wants to leave. And I think this is where we need to separate staying connected and staying physically available to be hit or controlled. You do not have to let her body override your body in order to stay loving. So important. And I'm really glad that it stuck up for that message because I noticed it now reading back that was what I was kind of implying, that by staying with her physically means that I might allow her reaction physically, but I'm really glad it reinforced the physical boundary here. Anyway, you do not have to let her body override your body in order to stay loving. A possible middle path is, I won't let you hit/push me. I'm going to move my body back. I'm still here. Or, you don't want me to breathe. I'm still allowed to breathe. I won't let you push me. Then you physically create a little space, not as abandonment, not as punishment, not I'm leaving you, but as a body boundary. That might be the key repair for both of you. Mommy stays connected and mommy's body still belongs to mommy. One question. When she pushes or hits to make you stop, what boundary would feel most honest and least abandoning? Holding her hands gently, moving your body back, standing up, or saying, I'm right here and I won't let you hit me while blocking. I said, I try any of these in the moment until something works. Usually me standing up is the thing that signals to her that I might leave and she tries to settle more. I just don't want to create insecure/anxious attachment with her. It said, I hear you, and I want to be really gentle but clear here. Standing up to protect your body is not the same thing as creating insecure attachment. The attachment wound would come more from, I withdraw love when you're difficult, not from, I stay loving and I won't let you hit me. So the repair is not necessarily to avoid standing up. It is to make standing up mean something different. Not, I'm leaving because you're too much, but I'm making my body safe so I can stay connected. You might say very simply, I'm standing up to keep my body safe. I'm not leaving you. And if she panics, I know you don't want me to go. I'm not going. I'm right here. Then you can stand a few feet away, stay visible, soften your face, and repeat less. The goal is to let her body learn mommy can create space without disappearing. One question. When you imagine saying, I'm standing up to keep my body safe, I'm not leaving you, does that feel calming, too wordy, or like it might still trigger her? I said, calming, and I'm ready to wrap up now. I think I had dug deep enough at that point. And it repeated a lot of the takeaways for me. It gave me 6 points. And then it ended with, this is beautiful work, Ellen. Not easy work, but very, very alive. What an acknowledgement from a robot. I'm alive. Thank you, robot. Again, I feel like it sneaks up on me sometimes how deep these AI coaching conversations can go. And I have to say, in part, I think it was due to really powerful questioning from the AI bot. The things that work really well in this line, I would say, of questioning was that it used a lot of body-based awareness, which is a core pillar within my own practice of coaching. And also, it used a lot of the parenting techniques that I have like shared here publicly online and that I've programmed into it. So, a lot of the principles it was drawing from were grounded in research and experts and, things that I espouse personally. And so it was basically doing a really great job of redirecting me back to the things that I know and believe in and stand for, and just helping me kind of tweak and navigate the nuance of my own dynamic with my child. Because it's not one size fits all. The principles may be universal for people who believe in conscious parenting, but how that is integrated is so unique from parent to child. And as you saw, like my core wounds coming up in parenting is a part of what conscious parenting work requires, and gentle parenting. But for me, I would not have access to gentle parenting if I didn't do the work that conscious parenting teaches me to do. To me, gentle parenting kind of gives you the end goal, like the outcome of parenting, where obviously the goal is to really stay regulated and grounded in the way that you respond and remain the adult the whole time. But I don't really know how to access that personally and authentically unless I do this kind of work and build this kind of awareness about my own wounds as a kid that I'm working through in real time by being mirrored from my own kid. And also, parenting kind of brings up things that you've long forgotten about how you were raised or how you felt as a child, because it'll just suddenly feel like, oh, this feels really familiar, even though this is a situation I've never been in with my child, which is the beauty and the very difficult challenge of parenting. So overall, I thought it asked very powerful questions. I thought that it lacked structure and really like guardrails for what did I want out of this conversation? What was my end goal? What was my agenda? What is in the way of that? It didn't clarify any of those agreements up front. So, like I said at the beginning, it's kind of hit or miss. Like sometimes it hits and sometimes it just totally misses because the line of questioning is just isn't drilling down into the place that I need it to. In this conversation, it happened to be successful. It definitely hit the core awareness that I was looking for out of this question. It gave me some very valuable tools to use and prompts and strategies, and also really cool awareness points. Like it asked really great questions that got me to develop my own awareness. And I will say I definitely self-coached my fair share through this conversation enough to guide it to where I wanted it to go. So I will say if you use this, you may have to do that. You may have to direct it like, I'm not going that way. I want to talk about this. And that's okay. A tool is a tool, and we get to be in charge. We get to use it the way that we want to use it, and it doesn't have to be perfect. We just get to use it. So just use the tool. That's the takeaway now. I really hope that this conversation was supportive and enlightening to you as it was for me. And again, I really appreciate hearing from you in the comments about what your takeaways are, what your experience is with the AI chatbot. And, hello, fellow parents. I'd love to know what kind of work you're doing internally to be a toddler parent. Thank you so much for watching. And thanks for being here, and I'll see you in the next one. And with that, we've come to the end of today's episode on the Contentment Creator channel, where we put AI to the test with some real life coaching. Whether you caught the whole episode or one of our segments, either way, thank you so much for making it all the way to the end. And I hope you are subscribed so you don't miss another episode. Join me in my mission to help a world full of content creators become a world of contentment creators. Bye, y'all.